couple of years ago, I was out mowing the lawn one day. I live in a house that has almost an acre of land, and I live in a somewhat quiet neighborhood. Typically, I mow the lawn about once a week, usually on weekends, and I have a riding lawnmower. I used to have a push mower, but just months before this story, I got the riding mower, and it's so much better. My property is pretty open for the most part. The backyard has a fence separating all parts of it from the neighbors. There are some trees and bushes, but most of them are at the back sides of the yard and the corners. My method when using the riding mower is to basically do laps around the yard. I go from the front yard all the way around to the back, and I keep doing that circling the house until I'm done. At the point that I'm done with the front yard though, I usually have a little bit left in the back because the backyard is slightly larger than the front. So I went out in the afternoon and took the lawnmower out of the garage. Then I started it up and began mowing the grass. I was doing my laps around, circling the house and cutting the grass. I remember when I was doing this, and in the front yard one time, I saw a man walking down the side of the street. He was approaching our house, and I did not recognize him as a neighbor, but I didn't really think too much of it. I went back around to the backyard, and the next time that I made it back around to the front yard, the man was now in front of my house. He was on the side of the street still, but was not walking. He was just standing there and appeared to be kind of looking up at my property. I didn't really know why he would be doing this, because I didn't know the guy. I continued, and soon I made it into the backyard again. By the next lap, when I made it to the front yard, I did not see the man at all. I figured he continued and went down the street. So after that, I was mowing for maybe 20 more minutes. I finished in the backyard, and then I was finally done. I drove the lawnmower back around to the front where my garage was. Then I drove it back inside to its place, and I turned it off. After I got off the lawnmower, I was about to walk back inside of the house, which connects to the garage. Inside the garage, I have the typical junk that would be in most garages. It's not too messy, but a little bit cluttered. So as I was walking to the door, I hit the button to close the main garage door. It was in that moment when something caught my eye to the right. I noticed somebody was hiding behind a trash can in the front corner inside the garage. It was a man, and the same guy who had been standing in front of the house. When I saw him, I tried to play it cool. I kinda stopped, but then quickly kept going. I made it back inside my house and was sure to lock the door behind me. Then I went to call the police. In the time that I was waiting for them to arrive, I heard the man try opening the door leading from the garage to the house. After that though, he did not leave. When the police arrived, the man was still there. He was caught for trespassing, and I really have no idea who he was. But when I mowed my lawn, I would always leave the garage open to that point because I was close by. That type of thing was unusual for my neighborhood, and nothing like it has happened since. This is something that happened a few years ago during the summer. I was out doing some yard work, clearing weeds in the yard. I have a large backyard, and there's a woods at the back side of it. A good part of the woods is my property, and then it connects to a neighbor's. So I went out near the edge of the woods, and I was clearing some of the area over there. A lot of wild weeds and unwanted plants tend to grow there, and it's more wild there than the rest of the yard. After I was out there working for probably close to an hour, I remember hearing a noise a little ways inside of the woods. I figured it to be an animal, and I tried looking for it. However, I could not see anything. At that time of the year, the woods was very dense and a little bit overgrown, so I continued to work. A short time later, though, I heard another noise, and I looked again. This time, surprisingly, I saw something. At first, I couldn't tell what it was, so I kept looking. Then, I saw there was this woman there, halfway behind a tree. She appeared to be looking right at me. I was very confused. We seemingly stared at each other for a few moments. Then, I moved away and went back into the yard. I hadn't recognized her, and I didn't know why anybody would be in my woods. This woman, whoever she was, remained inside of the woods. I walked back over, and when I looked again, she was gone. I asked if anybody was there, but I got no response. So after that, I went back to work. I was very weirded out by it, but overall was not too concerned. It was daytime and very light out, so I guess for that reason it seemed less creepy, and the woman seemed to be gone now. I didn't know why she was there, but I figured she got the idea that she should leave. So I continued working, only to see the woman again maybe 30 minutes later. I was at a different part of the woods, and I didn't hear a noise this time, but I suddenly just looked over and saw her there. She was deeper into the woods and in a different location, once more staring in my direction. This time I stopped what I was doing and I called out to her. I asked her who she was. I know she would have been able to hear me. She wasn't that far away, but the woman did not respond to me and just kept staring. I then moved a little bit closer, and when I did, she ran away and went out of sight. I was very confused and wasn't really sure what to do about this. Why she was in my woods, I had no clue. She wouldn't answer me. I kept working, just trying to move on and ignore the strange situation. For the next little while, I was undisturbed. But then I saw the woman once more, and this time she was standing a little bit closer, just inside of the woods. I heard her walking and I looked over. Now she was holding a larger stick in her hands. I wasn't sure if she was planning to use it as a weapon or what. And this was not just some flimsy twig, but something that looked pretty strong and sturdy. She started to walk over to me, and I asked her what she was doing. She did not answer, but continued moving towards me and went even faster. I was not interested in fighting her. I quickly moved away and ran back to my house. I went inside and then I called the police on her. After I did, I looked out several windows to the backyard. However, I did not notice the woman at all. She must have gone back into the woods. When the police arrived, they searched my property, but she was not there anymore. This time, she must have left for good. However, I decided to be done with my yard work for the day. This is something that happened many years ago. During this time, I was living with my husband in a smaller house, but a very nice and quiet neighborhood. It was a fun place to live because we knew most of the neighbors and we lived close to the city. My husband and I went outside one day to do some yard work. He had mowed the lawn and then was doing some work in the garage. I went to the garden out front next to our house and I was pulling weeds and watering plants. Now, when I was doing this for a little while, I remembered that out of nowhere, I heard somebody approaching. I looked behind me and saw this man walking right into our yard. I didn't know who he was, but he came right up to me and said hi. The man then told me that he had just moved in down the street. I said hi to him and welcomed him to the neighborhood and all that stuff. I was going to introduce him to my husband, but the man then turned and walked off, saying that he would see me again soon. Overall, something about the man seemed a little bit odd. However, I could not figure out exactly what it was, and I didn't think that it was a huge deal. I was not aware of which house this man had just moved into or anything, but there were lots of houses in the neighborhood, so I continued with my gardening for the next hour or so. Not long after, my husband and I were done and we went inside. This was some point in the afternoon. I remember that several hours later, we were inside and it was around sunset. I remember noticing that I happened to see the man walking down the sidewalk out front. When I remembered him, I told my husband about our encounter. My husband came in to see the man as we both expected him to walk by. However, the guy kind of slowed down. Then, just before our property ended and the neighbors started, the man surprisingly turned. He then started walking into our front yard. But he was not headed towards our front door or anything. Instead, he went right towards the side of our house, or possibly the backyard. When he got out of our sight, we went to another window. Both of us were very confused as to what he was doing. My husband said that he had never seen the guy before. Now, he went out of our sight for a while. We looked into the backyard, and it was getting pretty dark now, so we couldn't see everything. I didn't know if possibly the man had cut through our yard to go somewhere else or something like that, but we looked around for several minutes and did not see him. Then we finally left the room. It was very strange. My husband and I talked about it for several minutes. Neither of us were aware of a neighbor moving in. We didn't know of any houses on our street that had been for sale recently. Maybe it was one of the next streets over though. Well, about an hour later, I remember hearing the back door rattle. This came out of nowhere, and I knew that someone was trying to enter the house. The door was locked, and my husband heard it as well. We went over to look. When we got to a window that looked out to the back, we both saw the same man running away. We called the police. By the time they got there though, obviously the man was long gone. After that, I don't recall seeing the man again. He did not actually live in the neighborhood at all, so what he told me was a lie. I don't know what he had planned. I'm just glad that he left and did not come back. This is something that happened back when I was 12 years old. It still gives me the creeps to think about it. Back then, I would often mow the lawn for my parents. They would pay me a small amount of money to do some chores, and I didn't mind mowing the lawn at all. We had a push mower, but our yard was not really that big. The neighborhood was typical, and most of the properties were around the same size. I could mow both the front and backyard in under an hour, no problem. So that's what I was doing one afternoon in the spring. I started with the backyard and then finished with the front. I remember that as I was doing the front yard, I noticed this pickup truck driving slowly down the street. It pulled over a little ways down the road. I didn't think much of it at all. Our street had a sidewalk on both sides and lots of houses, so cars pulling over and people walking down the sidewalk was something that happened quite often. I just finished up and was done within probably 20 minutes after that. Well, I remember as I was finishing, I saw this man walking down the sidewalk. He had longer hair and was wearing a hat. I wasn't sure where he had come from, because I hadn't really been looking, but the man started walking up the driveway, and then he said hi to me. I said hi to him, and he asked me if I would be able to mow his lawn. He said that he lived at the end of the street in the gray house, and would pay me $20. That seemed like a ton of money to me at the time, and I instantly said yes. If he lived on my street, it would no doubt take me around the same time that it took me to cut my parents' yard. Now, it was a little bit later in the afternoon by now, but I figured that I would have enough time. So I told him that I had to go ask my mom. I quick went inside and told her that the neighbor at the end of the street wanted me to mow his lawn for $20. She mentioned some guy's name who I didn't know. I figured she knew him, and she said that I could. So I then went back outside and got my lawnmower. The man told me that I could put it in his truck, so I didn't have to push it all the way there. That was fine with me. So he then led me to his truck. It was then that I realized his truck was the same one that I had seen parking a while earlier. I put the mower in the back, and then I got into the passenger seat. He then drove me to his house. Except, he did not live at the end of my street. He didn't even live on my street at all. He lived close by, but several blocks over and one to the west. It was much farther than I thought it would be. So far that the houses on this particular street had different sized yards, and this man's yard was way bigger than mine. It was going to take me a lot longer to mow this. I was a little bit disappointed, but still, I had agreed to mow his lawn, so when we arrived, I took the mower and I started. The man went inside of his house and told me to knock on the back door of the house when I was done. The house did not look all that nice, kind of run down. The grass was pretty overgrown as well. When I mowed his yard, the back was so large that it probably took me over an hour on its own. Then I did the front, and by the time I was finished, it was almost completely dark out. I then went to the back door of the house and knocked on it like the man had instructed me to. He opened the door and told me to come inside. I stepped in and told the man that I was done. I asked him if he could give me a ride back home now. The man did not appear to live with anybody else, or at least nobody else appeared to be home. He seemed to be the only one there. The man told me that he would give me a ride home in a little bit, but not right now. He said in the meantime, I could go into the living room. I didn't like this at all, and I had a bad feeling. I didn't think to ask him why he couldn't give me a ride home right then and there. He didn't seem busy doing anything at all. I also completely forgot to ask him for the $20 he promised me for cutting his grass. At that moment, I just wanted to leave his house, so I walked back over to the back door. Then I just opened it and left. I then sprinted away, leaving the lawnmower in his front yard. I ran down the street, and the man did not leave and chase after me, but stayed in his house. I ran all the way back to my parents' house and went inside. I told them about what happened. They were very confused because they thought I was going to a completely different neighbor's house. My dad said that he was going to go over and get the lawnmower. So my dad left and came back a short time later. He said that when he got there, the lawnmower was down by the curb next to the garbage, which is not where I had left it. He also said that he knocked on the man's door several times, but he never answered. After that, I was not allowed to go near that street. But not too long after, I remember hearing that that house was for sale, and some other people soon moved in, thankfully. I don't know who that guy was, or where he went. This happened a couple of summers ago. I was out in the back doing some yard work. There had been some storms recently, and I have a somewhat large property. I have an open area in the backyard, and then there's also a woods that borders it. So I was with my wife, and we were picking up the tree branches and sticks in the yard. Then we were bringing it to a pile just inside of the woods. After we were done doing this, I was going to mow the lawn. So I remember that we were working for a while, and my wife suddenly came up to me and said that she saw someone in the woods. Nobody was supposed to be inside of our woods because it's a private property. So I went over to where the woods started and we had been going. When I looked though, I did not see anyone. My wife came over to me and pointed out where she had seen the man. He was gone by now though, and I did not know who it could have been. My wife told me that the man was just standing there, maybe 50 feet in, and then he saw her. She then walked away, and I guess he must have as well. I really had no explanation, but we kept working. When we were just about done though, I saw the man myself. I was bringing some tree branches over, and I saw the guy looking at me, standing a decent ways in the woods. It was just some guy. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. I yelled to him, asking what he was doing in our yard. The man then moved away. I decided to go out there and confront him. I knew that might not be the best idea, but I did it anyways. I started walking into the woods. When I did though, the man started moving away faster. He then started running. I actually ran too for a short time, and told the guy not to come back. However, he was too quick and was able to escape me. I didn't even really come close to catching up with him, and if I did, I don't even know what I would have done. I certainly wasn't going to tackle him or anything. I just wanted to talk to him and let him know not to come back into my yard. After I felt like I had chased him far enough away from my property, I went back. I rejoined my wife in the yard, and then I was able to mow the lawn. Now, I thought that was the end of the guy being in our yard, but not quite. So the rest of the day was fine. I got the lawn mowed, no problem. But after we had gone to bed, we were both woken up that night at around 1 a.m. I heard a loud knocking coming from the front door. We were both very confused. I got up and looked to see who was there. The knocking lasted for maybe 30 seconds. It continued as I was walking towards the front door. By the time I reached the front door, though, it had stopped. I looked out and I saw what appeared to be a man moving away. I didn't see him well, and I didn't see him very long before he went out of sight, but I think it was the same guy. After that, he did not come back. I still don't know what he was doing, and I don't know why he knocked on our door in the middle of the night.